and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. We're presented by The Athletic and CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Michael Pina, to come on because while I wasn't planning on doing a podcast today and releasing it to the masses, when Kyrie Irving gets traded for Isaiah Thomas, I feel like it's necessary to do an emergency impromptu podcast. So, Mike, before we get into the details of the trade, you're about to get on a plane to LA. I'm sorry for interrupting your day, but how's it going, man? Are you at least doing well?
I'm hanging in there, man. Honored to be a guest. Second time this summer.
Second time this summer. The last one where I had Mike on killed in terms of listenership. I feel like that says a lot about Mike, a lot more than it says about me. So I wanted to have Mike on, also a Boston Celtics fan. I think it's pretty fair to say that. I know that, doing this professionally kind of throws a wrench into some of that, obviously, but it's probably pretty fair to still call you a Boston Celtics fan, right?
It is fair, yeah. I try to stay as objective as possible, but on a night like tonight, for the first half hour after a trade like this happens, I'm just very emotional, and so I'm trying to work through it right now and look at it logically.
So yeah, let's kind of just go through the details here, and for our listeners, say exactly what the terms of the trade are. According to Shams Charania, I believe, who had it first, is that right, or was it Windhorst?
He was the first one that I saw.
So
Shams
had it as Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, Ante Žižić, Brooklyn's 2018 first-round pick for Kyrie Irving, who is waiving his trade kicker to go to Cleveland. I believe that is everything that has been reported thus far, correct?
That's all I've seen.
So let's assume that is the final terms of the deal. What is your gut reaction to this deal?
My gut reaction is that it's a very bad deal for the Celtics.
Yes.
I guess if you're looking for a worst case scenario as a Celtics fan, Tatum or Jaylen Brown would be involved in this deal. They get to keep both of those guys. That's fantastic. We don't know how. So Kyrie is a few years younger than Isaiah, even though they were they're about equal, on par with production last season.
It's about a 4-year difference in age, I believe.
Right, and Kyrie can become a free agent in 2 seasons, whereas
maybe
Isaiah,
3. I'm sorry, I might have given Isaiah an extra year.
Yeah, I think it's 25 and 29.
Yeah.
So you might be right there. So anyway, yeah, and so Kyrie can become a free agent. He can opt out after 2 years. Isaiah will be an unrestricted free agent next summer. And Isaiah has, a hip injury that he will not need surgery, which is good. But the Celtics still, I think Brad Stevens went on Chris Mannix's podcast a few days ago and said that Isaiah would have a test done in September, and they would get a clearer look at what was going on and a clear look at a timeline for when he could come back. So I think Isaiah's hip is a problem. It's a variable. The age is a variable. But at the end of the day, Isaiah is really good. He met Gordon Hayward when he was a part of the pitch meeting to bring Gordon to Boston. Jay Crowder's contract is phenomenal, and
that's a big piece for me too. Yeah.
Yeah, he's incredibly valuable, especially when if you're building a championship contender over these next few years, and you will probably have to get into the luxury tax here in a little bit. That's a really important thing to have someone locked up, I believe, through 2019, 2020 on just an absolute steal of a deal.
Yeah, it's about 3 years remaining with, I think, $22 million, which is insane given that I think in a single year, if he would hit the free agency market right now, he would probably get $20 million a year.
Oh, yeah, for sure. No doubt about it. I mean, he's a bona fide swingman who can hit threes. So, and guard multiple positions. So you need guys like that in today's league. That's a bummer losing him, obviously. And then, Žižić is kind of whatever. But that unprotected 2018 Nets pick. I think the Nets. I wrote a piece a little while ago about how I think the Nets are going to be actually not the worst team in the league, and I think they'll be okay. I think that pick could go, 7th, 8th, 9th potentially. Just looking at some teams in the East that are tanking, but that's still, that's a lottery pick for a guy who, I guess, at the end of the day, your opinion on this deal stems on what your thoughts are about Kyrie Irving. And I love Kyrie Irving. He's one of my favorite players to watch in basketball. That being said, I really worry about, how his game has developed over the course of his entire career. I don't think he's necessarily gotten better in any one specific area. He's not a very good defender, and he will not have LeBron James as a teammate. And I think LeBron made his life so much easier, and the Celtics do not have LeBron James. So it's going to be very interesting.
So my initial gut reaction was similar to yours. I think this is a really bad deal for Boston. I think that you can make a case that 2018 Brooklyn pick by itself is pretty close to the same value that Kyrie is. Just in terms of Kyrie has 2 years left on his deal, plus you get his bird rights to be able to extend him, whereas that Nets pick will be, I think it's probably going to be more in the 3 to 5 range. So you're getting a top 5 pick, let's say, in all likelihood, for 4 years on an exceedingly cost-controlled basis, plus restricted free agency rights, which can extend to 4 more years on a more cost-controlled basis than what you're getting Kyrie Irving for. Now, obviously, that is a future asset, whereas the Celtics are going for more present value, and I think that you can make a case for trading that pick for Kyrie Irving. Just because, given how close they are, I think that it's fair to want to trade some uncertainty for certainty, given that they're in the top 2 of the Eastern Conference. To throw in Isaiah Thomas's year on top of that, when Isaiah Thomas and Kyrie, I think that they are close as players. I would rather have Kyrie. Would you agree with that you'd rather have Kyrie than Isaiah Thomas next year?
I think fully healthy and in Brad Stevens. See, it's really difficult just when we're in a vacuum. I think Kyrie is better. In Brad Stevens' system, we know that Isaiah Thomas can thrive and be a second-team All-NBA guard. And it'll be really interesting to see how Kyrie the way they
can we also point out, though, that Kyrie is also moving from Ty Lue to Brad Stevens, which is going to be a pretty big deal?
That's fair, but, Kyrie wants to leave LeBron presumably because he wants his own team. He wants to shoot the ball even more than he already did last season. And, that's not really how the Celtics play or how Brad Stevens wants to play. It'll just be really interesting to see how his shot selection changes, how he gets buckets, how often he isolates. Isaiah was extremely efficient isolating, but that was not his bread and butter. Mm-hmm. So I think how Kyrie gets his in Stevens' system, and Brad Stevens isn't going to just keep things as they were. He's going to tinker with his system and make everybody as comfortable as possible because he's a great coach, and that's what great coaches do. But Kyrie, his entire career, has been one of the most high-volume isolation scorers in basketball. He loves the mid-range. It's just going to be really interesting to see how he fits with Hayward, and I'm really interested to see what Hayward and Horford and I know there aren't too many other veterans on the team now because Crowder and IT are gone and Avery Bradley's gone, but that was the entire team last year. It was like Bradley, IT, Crowder. Those were kind of the veteran locker room leadership guys, and they're all gone. And it's like the whole identity of the team just changes.
Yeah, this is an entirely different team than what we saw last year. I think it's very fair to say that. Defensively, their identity is totally gone. And in terms of locker room identity, it's just totally gone and different now. Losing Jay Crowder and Avery Bradley defensively is a big deal. Just getting back to the value of this trade, I think that it's pretty fair to say that Isaiah Thomas probably has something resembling half as much value as Kyrie Irving, just because the 1 year versus 2 years, maybe a little bit more than that. Then you throw in Jay Crowder on top of that. Jay Crowder, as we mentioned, has incredible surplus value on his contract, just given the fact that 3 years, $22 million for a proven NBA starter in this marketplace who can fit into just about every single situation in the league and thrive. That's really valuable. Ante Zizic, I think, is a positive asset. Drafted, I believe, 23rd overall in the 2016 NBA draft. I had him rated as a lottery pick that year. One of the most productive players overseas for his age that we've seen in a while. His production compared to Nikola Jokic over there, totally different players in that Zizic is more of a motor, energy big man, whereas Jokic is this incredibly skilled, unbelievably talented player who is just clearly much better than Ante Zizic. But at the same time, you're still getting one of the more productive players in Europe on your team next year at a center position. Then you throw in this Nets pick, and it's just crazy to me that this is the deal that Danny Ainge would try to use to improve his team. And before we get into the Cleveland side, because I think that the Cavs did exceedingly well here, let's talk about Boston a little bit more, because I think it's impossible to evaluate this deal outside of the parameters of what Boston's opportunity cost was this summer. You look at who they could have acquired this summer, and I know that we talked about this a little bit beforehand. You think that there are some mitigating factors here, which we'll get into. But the fact that it seems like they were unable or unwilling to give up the Brooklyn 2018 pick for Jimmy Butler, but are willing to give it up, as well as Isaiah Thomas, as well as Jay Crowder, as well as another asset, Ante Zizic, for Kyrie Irving, is just very interesting asset valuation to me. Jimmy Butler's obviously a little bit older. There were discrepancies in terms of timeline that they had to follow to be able to go out and sign a free agent or maximize a free agent such as Gordon Hayward. That was your point, and I think that you'll kind of make that argument. But it's just really interesting to me that they wouldn't try and get Chicago to hold off on a bad deal to consummate something similar to this. What are your thoughts on the opportunity cost here of trading for Kyrie Irving versus trading for another star down the road?
Right. So going back to Jimmy Butler, as I said before we started recording, I think all season long, I thought that the Celtics wanted to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted to keep all their assets, and they wanted to go hunting in free agency for someone like Gordon Hayward. And they got Gordon Hayward. They got to keep their pick. They ended up trading the first overall pick for Tatum and a future first-round pick. So they just kind of rolled that boulder down the road a little bit and got another asset for potentially for another future blockbuster trade sometime down the line. So I always thought that was the smart way to go. And for as great as Jimmy Butler is, I thought that holding off, keeping your assets, keeping as many avenues to make your team better open as possible, because with that trade that we're talking about where they would have given up the Brooklyn pick, they would have also had to give up Avery Bradley and Jay Crowder, I believe, were the two role players involved in that deal. And at the time, the Celtics were, the first, or they were banging on the door of the first seed, in the Eastern Conference. So they really valued their continuity. They thought they were very good. They thought they wanted to roll into the playoffs with what they had. So I understood at the time, and in hindsight, yes, it is very weird to see them so willingly part ways with such a valuable asset like the Nets pick. But again, in talking with people in that front office earlier this offseason, I think they really expect the Nets to be. I know you thought that the pick would be top 5. I think the Celtics think that pick is going to be not that high. I think they're pretty confident in the Nets being a little bit better this year with the Indiana Pacers, the Chicago Bulls, a whole bunch of teams in the East, Atlanta Hawks getting substantially worse. So
can we talk about that for a second? Brooklyn won 20 games last year. Do we think that they jumped 10 games this offseason? Because that's where you have to get to be in that 7, 8, 9 range. You have to get to like 32 wins or so. That's a lot of wins, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they were not that terrible when Jeremy Lin was healthy. I mean, if you have Jeremy Lin healthy, I know you lose Brook Lopez, and that's a bummer. He was a big deal for how they wanted to play with his ability to stretch the floor all of a sudden. But, I mean, if you get a productive year out of DeMarre Carroll, if D'Angelo Russell responds well to that environment in Brooklyn in year 3 after 2 disastrous seasons with the Lakers, I mean, that could be – I mean, another thing is, like, Brooklyn's going to be trying to win games. They're trying to build something. Yeah. They're trying to be competitive. A lot of teams in the East next year are going to be tanking, and a couple teams out West. So I just think that the value of that pick is maybe not as high in the Celtics' eyes as it might seem. That said, I would not have traded it. I would not have included it in this deal, and I'm still just like floored by the whole thing. I think the biggest variable here, again, I know I mentioned it already, is Isaiah Thomas's hip.
Yeah.
If he's, not 100% on opening night, or that thing acts up, he re-aggravates it in the middle of the year, it's tricky. And then not to mention, like, him being an unrestricted free agent in 2018, and he's been very vocal about the fact that he wants a max contract, and I don't think the Celtics were too pumped about giving him a 4-year or a 5-year, heaven forbid, max deal. So I think that's a big factor here. But I mean, if you had Isaiah healthy, you had Crowder instead of Kyrie, I think that duo is just, it's such a better fit for the modern game. And if you were the Celtics and you waited and the Cavaliers traded Kyrie elsewhere, let's say for Eric Bledsoe and whatever, I mean, with that team, with Isaiah, Crowder, Hayward, Al Horford, you have a real shot at the finals. So it's an interesting one. And I'm still really scratching my head.
Yeah. So, like, it's also really hard to avoid talking about this deal without discussing the context of the Celtics trading number 1 overall, which would have been Markelle Fultz, and I know that Boston has said we would have taken Jason Tatum number 1. And as someone who is as high on Jason Tatum as I think really anyone that evaluates the NBA draft, I still really can't get behind that as a decision-making process. So let's say that they came away this offseason, which I think was realistic given what they've shown they've been willing to give up. They could have come away this offseason with Markelle Fultz, Gordon Hayward, and a star a la, Jimmy Butler, Paul George, etc., we'll say. Instead, they now have Kyrie Irving. And within all of this, I think that if they were trading for Jimmy Butler, it probably would have cost less, just given what the Bulls actually got for Jimmy Butler, than what this deal is. So let's say that they would have given up, or they would have now that roster, like I said, versus this one, which will be Kyrie Irving. It'll be, Gordon Hayward as an addition to this roster without Isaiah Thomas, which you would have had Isaiah Thomas before for another year. And I guess a lot of young pieces that may or may not work, but you don't have as many future assets, it seems like. This is I think Danny Ainge kind of outsmarted himself here, and I was the captain of the train saying, like, well, slow down. They still have a ton of assets. We have to see what they do this summer. We have to see what they do next summer. We have to see what becomes of all of these future picks, etc. But this really does seem to me that, given that they are seeming to prioritize present value over future value, that Danny Ainge did outsmart himself a little bit by not going with option number 1, which would have been like Isaiah Thomas, Markelle Fultz, Gordon Hayward, Jimmy Butler, Al Horford, etc. Even if you have to, tell Chicago, hey, just hold on a little bit. We have to make sure that everything works order of operations wise, but we'll get the deal done with you. maybe they weren't willing to do that. Maybe, Chicago wanted to just get this thing done, and no one wants to trade with Boston. But the opportunity costs here do seem to me to be a pretty real factor in evaluating this deal.
Yeah, I think you said something interesting there with regards to them making a play for the present as opposed to the future. I actually kind of think that this is, again, another look. This is a look towards the future. In that,
I think it's both, for what it's worth. I don't think that you're wrong there. I think that I'm sorry to cut you off, but I do want to point out a few numbers here because I ran the math on what the money looks like here. So with Kyrie Irving, you're paying him for his 25 through 29 seasons over the course of the next 5 years. With Isaiah, you're paying him for his 29 season through his 33-year-old season. So big difference in terms of what the back end of these situations could look like. You would actually be paying Isaiah Thomas $4 million more, $138 million to Isaiah Thomas versus $134 million to Kyrie Irving over the course of the next 5 years. If both these guys get their max contracts, and that's without assuming that Isaiah Thomas could make All-NBA next season and qualify himself for that 35% max, which I don't think anyone in the NBA is going to be willing to pay him. But let's just say 30% max to Isaiah Thomas, 30% max to Kyrie. Both of these guys over the course of the next 5 years would actually be you'd actually be paying Kyrie a little bit less, and you'd be paying him for what ostensibly should be more prime years.
So let me ask you a quick question. Do you think Kyrie Irving will be a top 10 player when he is in that age 27, 28, 29 range? Because if you're the Celtics, I think you think that he will by making this deal.
Yeah.
That's and you think that you've got a guarantee. Yeah, it's, now that I'm thinking about it more, that must be their line of thinking.
I would bet it. Man, that's so hard because Kyrie's never had a coach like Brad Stevens. I think that actually is going to be a big factor for Kyrie next year. I think he is going to be a lot better next year than he was in Cleveland. Even without LeBron James there, I think you're going to see more in terms of his passing ability. Efficiency-wise, there's nowhere to go for him downwardly. He's just a stud. Or nowhere to go upwardly, I mean. I think the efficiency probably stays the same. But, man, that's hard. That is really, really hard.
It's, a really tricky question. I mean, if you want to win the championship, you need multiple guys who are on that level. And when you look at the Celtics roster, I mean, they have a lot of promising pieces who can potentially get there someday. And they have all these assets that, instead of dancing around the bush, let's just say that they want to trade for Anthony Davis eventually. So to actually win the championship, which has always been their ultimate goal, you need those Kingslayer type guys. And, re-signing Isaiah, as good as he was last season, coming off the hip injury, I don't think he would ever get there. I think that was probably his peak. Crowder is a role player. We don't know what the 2018 Nets pick will be, but it's really difficult to say that piece would ever be as good as Kyrie has been, someone who's had some of the best finals scoring performances in NBA history already on his resume. So it's
pretty clear Boston is betting on Kyrie having more upside still.
Yeah, and I mean, you kind of should, because if you look at just how stars are kind of progressing in the league, there's a noticeable trend where the way that guys train in the offseason, the way guys take care of their body, I think the age 30 season is always, we kind of grew up with that being the big, not fall off a cliff age, but that's where you start to noticeably decline. And I think that we might have to push that up eventually, just with how guys are, just with the science around the game that's just constantly improving, and then guys being able to constantly evolve, whether it be looking at your diet, having a personal chef with you at all times, having like one of those chambers, those like 0 sub-degree temperature chambers, like in your living room. Like, it's a different world and a different league right now. So I think if you look at someone like Isaiah, for example, who made this dramatic leap at his age 28 season, you look at Steph Curry, what he's done. So it's not outside the realm of thought to think that Kyrie could make another leap, which is really scary to think about. And if he does, he would for sure be a top 10 player. But that's not a guarantee.
Yeah, I think that it's clear Boston is betting on Kyrie becoming a top 10 player. It's given the value that they're giving up. I get that you always have to pay a premium as you get higher up the rung. I think that Danny Ainge paid too much of a premium. And if Ainge paid too much of a premium, looking at it from the other direction here, I think it's clear that Cleveland did awesome in this deal. Like, I don't think they could have possibly done better. When I did the podcast with Adi Joseph talking about what we believe the best possible outcome is for Cleveland, we said that, they would get not only present value, but they would get a ton of future value. And in my opinion, I felt that they needed to get a lot of future value in a potential trade like this. I thought that if I was them, I would be going more toward getting future value than present value. In this deal, in getting Isaiah Thomas and Jay Crowder, you get incredible present value. I think that there's a chance the Cavs are going to be better next year than they were this year even, because Jay Crowder is going to be an awesome starting level wing. Isaiah Thomas is going to step in, do a relatively similar, I think you can make an argument that it'll be better than Kyrie next year. I wouldn't make that argument, but I think it's a fair one to make. And that they'll just be a better team next year. Having said that, they also now have Crowder for 3 years. They have Ante Žižić for 8 years, potentially, if he works out. And they have this incredibly high upside asset here in this Brooklyn 2018 pick where, as we've said, I think anywhere from 3 to 5 is a fair assessment. You think that anywhere from 6, 7, 8 is a fair assessment of where Brooklyn will be. But we're in the same ballpark. Like, this is a top half of the lottery pick in our opinion. And that's a great pick to get when Kyrie Irving essentially just told you, I'm not happy to be here. I do not want to be here. Trade me now. For Koby Altman in his first deal as a general manager, essentially like 3 or 4 years older than us doing this job, to go out and get this package for Kyrie Irving is really remarkable to me.
Yeah, I was just thinking while you were talking, what do you think Cleveland can get if they dangle that 2018 Nets pick on the market? Because this team has not had any trade assets whatsoever through basically, since they made like the J.R. Smith and Iman Shumpert deal, they got Mozgov, those type of deals. They got Kyle Korver last year with the first round pick. But the cupboard's been bare. Now they have, we're disagreeing on how valuable it will be exactly, but it's a valuable asset. Like, there's no doubt about it. So taking that, and if they want to get really aggressive, I think, I mean, it'll take me a little while to kind of do a little research and figure out what are some reasonable guys they could hunt. But that's super intriguing. And I know that you want to hold on to that just in case LeBron leaves. But in my opinion, when you have a chance at winning it all, you got to go for it. Like, that's just my mentality, because you don't know. Like, LeBron could leave either way. So, like, these are extremely rare opportunities to be the best team in the East, which I think the Cavaliers are and will be this season. And LeBron does not lose unless he's in the finals. So, it's really interesting to see how they could upgrade. I think Crowder is, he's perfect for a matchup against the Golden State Warriors. I don't think he's as good of a defender as a lot of people do. I think he took a step backwards last season, but he's tough. I think he probably shot above his weight a little bit last year. I think that could come down some next season. But with the with like the looks that he's never had anyone like LeBron passing the ball, so maybe it stays where it was, which was above 40% 3-point shooter.
Can we also point out that like by getting Jay Crowder in this deal, they really just kind of make Boston worse and make it harder for them to guard LeBron James next season. I think you can certainly make the argument for the future, whenever or if LeBron leaves Cleveland, that this deal sets them up well for the future on both sides. But for next season, which is what it seems like Cleveland is going to try and make a run at, as you said, now that they've made this deal, this makes their competition in the Eastern Conference, I think, easier.
I mean, I think, like, before this deal, I thought that the Celtics were either the best or the second best team, and then I thought it was the Celtics and the Cavaliers, and then there was like a little bit of a gap, and then you had the Wizards, the Raptors, maybe the Bucks you want to throw in that tier. I mean, right now, I think the Wizards might be the second best team in the Eastern Conference. I think the Celtics are really going to have some growing pains here. Their defensive identity, which is kind of, they weren't like one of the best defensive teams in the league last season. They struggled with size and on the glass, but I mean, they were ferocious.
There should be a significant concern defensively in Boston now. Like, Brad Stevens is awesome. Who are the plus defenders on the Boston Celtics roster right now? I would say Gordon Hayward is one. I would say Al Horford is one.
Marcus Smart
is certainly one.
I would say they're really hoping that they get a lot out of Marcus Morris. They're really hoping that
a lot of teams have made that bet.
Yeah, they're really hoping that Aaron Baines can provide I mean, he's not a rim protector by any means, but I think they're really hoping that he can be an interior presence on the defensive end.
Hey, Daniel Tice won the German Defensive Player of the Year award last year.
Sure, yes, he did. I think they're really hoping that Terry Rozier makes a jump defensively. I mean, he has the physical ability, one of the most athletic guards in the league.
To me, the two guys that they're putting a lot of hope in are Jaylen Brown and Shimi Ojeleye. If Ojeleye can get any minutes at all defensively, because he's the kind of big, powerful athlete that they need defensively, because they're going to have to play quite a bit small now. Like, they're just going to have to play small often.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with Jaylen. I think a lot of people around Boston are just making the assumption that he's going to take a jump in year two. The more I think about it, despite the flashes that he showed this offseason at Summer League and in Utah and a little bit in Las Vegas, I don't know. I mean, he really struggled on the defensive end last year. It was I mean, he looked like a rookie. He was undisciplined. He has the athleticism to be great and to be extremely versatile. And they're going to need him to be like just so much more sound than he was, and he's still 20. I think he's 21 years old. So
yep. He'll be 21 in October.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, it's a lot to ask for him, but then again, this is kind of what I was talking about when I thought that this deal was much more towards the future than the present. I think that the opportunity to have Tatum, have Jaylen play a lot of minutes in this rotation this season with Crowder gone, that's something you can look forward to, I guess. But again, it's tough because they might be the 3 seed.
Yeah, I think I would still bet on them being 2, but I think they're closer to the pack now than they were before this deal was consummated. Really quickly, before I let you go, let's talk about Cleveland. Does this deal make them better or worse when it comes to facing off against Golden State?
That's really tricky. I think better. I don't necessarily
think I agree.
I don't think that Isaiah, like peak Kyrie in the finals and in the playoffs, there's really nobody like that in the world. So I don't want to put that on Isaiah, but I think that he can make up enough of the difference. And then when you have Crowder, that's like a perfect piece to go up against a team like Golden State. He can guard multiple positions. He can switch from Curry to Clay to KD. He can bother those guys. He won't get bodied in the post. He's just he's a sound defender. So that's a huge upgrade, and he'll play a ton of minutes for them.
Yeah, like their closing lineup now is, Isaiah Thomas, LeBron, Jay Crowder, probably Kevin Love, and probably Tristan Thompson. That's a big lineup. I don't know if they would always try and close like that, though. Like, maybe you sit one of Kevin Love and Tristan and go with JR. But JR got toasted last year against Klay Thompson in terms of giving up open looks. I know that Klay didn't always take advantage, but JR got toasted off the ball. So, I don't know, man. It makes them better. It gives them more versatility. You could throw Iman Shumpert into that mix, too, as a versatile defender. Getting more versatile defenders to face off against Golden State, I think, is important for Cleveland. And that's why, I don't think there's a massive difference with Kyrie versus Isaiah defensively. And that's where I think Cleveland lost that series last year. So I think it helps them this year against Golden State more than it hurts them, even if there is a downgrade, in my opinion, going from Kyrie to Isaiah.
Yeah. This is it's really interesting. I mean, I'm really looking forward to, if the Celtics do make the Eastern Conference Finals, or if they do play the Cavs in the playoffs. I just think that will be a fascinating series, because you have, that's some bad blood. You have, I think Isaiah and Crowder are, honestly, I think that I know they know it's a business, but I bet that they resent Boston. I mean, Isaiah was so humongously popular last season. He was like a phenom. I attended every single home game. The emotion in the building and throughout the playoffs with him was something like I'd never seen before. Boston loved him, and I mean, he loved Boston too. And then when you factor in the LeBron-Kyrie relationship, when LeBron goes up against Kyrie in the playoffs and makes him be like, oh, you didn't want to play with me? You're going to regret that, pal.
Yeah, two quick points to make there. So these two teams play October 17th as one. It's either their first or second game of the year. So that's going to be super fun.
That's opening night.
Yep.
Opening night.
Yep. Opening night, so that's going to be very fun. And second point here, so Adrian Wojnarowski just tweeted out, Kyrie Irving thrilled with joining Celtics, and they'll have a great chance to eventually re-sign him. Boston made deal with strong belief he'll stay. One fun point to make there that probably means nothing. Kyrie Irving's father, Drederick Irving, went to Boston.
BU.
Yep. So who knows? Maybe that'll end up helping them out. Pina, do you have anything else you want to say before we get off here?
I do not. I am still a little shocked, to be honest, even though we've kind of been talking about this for 45 minutes. It's just a fascinating trade. These two teams played in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, and they just traded their second best player and their best player for each other. So it's totally just madness, and I'm still trying to process everything.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. Mike, thanks for coming on. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Please tell the people where they can find your work.
Michael V. Pina is my Twitter, and I am a staff writer with Vice Sports. So all my work, and it looks like I will probably be, as I look at my email right now, it looks like I am wanted to write about this trade. So there will be something up from me probably tomorrow, hopefully.
Go follow Mike. He does great work over at Vice. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the Game Theory Podcast on iTunes. It really helps us move up in the ratings. We'll be back Thursday, I believe, with another podcast here. We're going to try and probably finish out that top 25 players, 23 and under, in the regular in the NBA right now. I think I'm going to release the second half of that, but I might do another Kyrie Irving-centric podcast because this deal is massive, and it is worth breaking down in more substantial terms. So keep it locked here at the Game Theory Podcast. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.